getting offended easily. You feel a bit stuck, but you find that when you ask people for feedback, you don't take it very well. If so, this episode is for you. But if you find yourself on the other side of that person, this episode is also for you. So
Oh.
basically, this episode is for everybody.
Welcome back to another episode of the Reason to Behold podcast with Tolly Talks.
And Arnold Reasons.
Right, so we're coming out the gate shooting. What are you saying, T? Talk to me about this subject.
There were some conversations that we had when we had our tomahawk steak dinner a couple of weeks ago, and also when we were recording one of our last episodes, about how sometimes offense can keep us from the next level. I don't remember exactly how we framed it. Like, what did we have written down? What was the exact wording we had?
How being offended can hinder your progress.
And we were talking about this from the point of view of, we all have people in our lives, let's put it that way, where you know that they need some feedback. You try and give them that feedback. Everything gets blown up. People get offended. And then weeks, days, months later, they're still in that same position and they're frustrated about being in that same position. We all know those people. We have all probably been those people. And something that I've just been realizing is that, like, you can't afford to be offended if you want to grow and if you want to be more than you currently are. Because there is a lot on the other side of what could be offensive that helps you to be better and to be more than you currently are. And I think that the current environment that we live in is one where people are so easily offended. So easily offended, and it's becoming easier and easier to be offended. And if we're not careful, we're going to get swept up in it. And I think that a lot of people aren't living the lives that they could be because they're not taking the feedback that comes sometimes in the form of offensive words, because most people aren't actually trying to hurt you when they give you feedback. Some people are. Some people are. But if you really get it right, even those people who are trying to hurt you, their feedback can make you better if you take it the right way. And that's really what it comes down to. Are we taking these things the right way?
So it's so funny because I'm the type of person, right, who, you already know, bro, in certain conversations, I'll make my case, right? You might bring something that I disagree with, I'll make my case. But I'm the type of person that no matter how much I generally disagree with what I hear, even if you don't see it in the moment with my response or how I maybe even react, if I don't think through it before, like, kind of responding, I always generally have like a practice of thinking further beyond the conversation. And the number of times that has saved me, bro, because there are certain times where in the moment, like, for whatever reason, I disagree strongly with whatever it is that I'm hearing. I don't want to accept it, right? And sometimes, rightly so, right? But equally, on the other side, there are also times when, after reflecting, I realized that, you know what, there was a valid point, or maybe all of it was valid, or at the very least, there was something for me that I could learn from the perspective that was shared. And I think when it comes down to why we're offended, I think one of the things that happens is we have this idea of going for perfection, right? Right. We don't want to accept the fact or the possibility that we might be coming up short in a particular area. And it's so interesting because excuse me, as believers, this cuts to the core of the faith that we stand on, right? Because what is the gospel message? Well, before the good news, it starts with, hey, there's some really terrible news you need to accept, right? And you can't get to the good news in any long and sustainable way without first understanding, comprehending, and accepting the bad news, i.e., you have sinned. You have fallen short of the designer's intent. You have not lived according to the way that he has created us to live. And as a result of that, you and I deserve eternal damnation, punishment, and eternal separation from him, right? We need to pay for our sins. And I think it's so interesting, again, because in this journey of faith, you see how Like, I remember the times where you had so many different people in the ways that they would present the gospel message, right? You'd have the turn or burners on one extreme, then you would have the come as you are, forget everything from before, it doesn't really matter, God just loves you, right? On the other end of the extreme. And you see that both extremes produce very different fruit. And I think what I've found in looking at both sides, and maybe even, I guess, leaning one way to the left or to the right at some point in my journey, right? Something that I've found is that the extremes are not what we're supposed to be. There's a perfect blend of understanding the bad news and the seriousness of it and not downplaying it that has to come with the deliverance or the delivering the message of the good news. Because when you just give the good and nothing bad about it beforehand, who's going to want to say no to this person that loves me, right? Who's not going to want to say yes to someone that's giving me eternal life and they don't really care about my sins or how short I have come of how they've designed me to live? Like, it's a much easier sell, because it's offensive for me to say to you that, hi, I know you think you've got it all together, but contrary to what you think about yourself and how good of a human being you think you are, here is the truth that reveals what's really going on between you and the eternal creator, and what will therefore happen with eternity thereafter. So it's a very offensive thing. And as believers, I think that if we really even take some of the things we're so easily offended by when it comes to people bringing some level of critical or bad news or something that we don't necessarily want to hear, but would benefit us to at least consider, like, if we come back to that same foundation, I think it should really open our hearts to at least consider it.
Because I was thinking about something like, if I told you there is £1 million, yeah, in a briefcase, but the briefcase is wrapped in poo, would you go through the poo to get to the briefcase? Would you though?
I think it's going to come down to how much I really believe there's £1 million inside.
No. Let's say you've seen me take £1 million in a briefcase, dump truckload of poo on it.
Yeah.
If you've seen it, would you
Brother,
go through the
I'm going
for
it.
mill? Right?
I'm going for it.
Everybody's going for it. There's not many people that won't go through a little bit of poo for £1 million. Yeah. And what you said about it depends on if you believe it's really there, right? If I believe that in every piece of conversation, in everything, there is something of value in there. Yeah. So even when someone is telling me I'm bad at something, there is some value in that, because I can then understand how I'm being received and perceived by other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can change my ways and become better received and perceived by other people. And there's value in that. So if I believe that, okay, even in this tough interaction, there's some gold in there, there's some value in there. I'll get through all the crap to get to that one thing, because I know it's at the center of it. But so many people don't believe that even in the things that are offensive, that there's some gold at the bottom of it. There's some value at the center of it, that you just have to wade through the poo and get to the gold. And that belief thing is something that we choose. You know, I can choose to be offended, or I can choose to try and see the value in it.
Oh my goodness. I'm just trying to pull up a scripture. Hold on.
Because I thought there were some scriptures about the gospel being offensive.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, bro.
Yeah. I thought there were some scriptures about that.
I'm pretty sure there are. Rock of offense. Give me 1 second. The one that I'm even looking at is not even the one that I was looking for. Hold on, where is it? Give me the full chapter. 14. I can't find it. If I find it, I'll bring it back later. Or if you do, you can too. But yeah, man, I think Yeah. And I think this is the other thing, is that on the other, probably I think one of the barriers here is also going to come back to something that we speak about from time to time, but it's pride. Because
Yeah.
pride says, I have it all together and there is no need for me to improve or correct or adjust in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And you know, another thing is as well, sometimes it's even the familiarity, right? Which I think is probably going to be a bigger piece, because
Hmm.
sometimes it's not even just that we don't want to hear correction or we don't want to hear something that signposts us towards adjusting, but
Mm.
the truth is we just don't want to hear it from you.
You.
Like, you are the voice that I don't want to hear. And I think it's a challenging one, because
Yeah.
sometimes there are potentially good reasons as to why we may feel that way, right? But I think at the same time, it's like it comes back to having an underlying belief that if God can use rocks, if he can use a donkey, if he can
Donkeys. Yeah.
use even Pharisees and Sadducees to become teaching points, then how much more can he potentially use some of the people that we really don't want to hear some of this stuff from in order
Mhm.
for us to grow? And then the other thing is as well, bro, like, what's that saying? Listen to your haters because they are listen to your haters because they're your, I can't remember the other half of it, but the point is that your haters are probably your most honest critics, and in the things
Yeah.
that they say, there are usually things that you can actually benefit from, which the people that love you the most and care about you the most,
They won't
and are
dare say
probably
it.
trying to be as sensitive around you the most, are not willing to say
Hmm.
those things.
Hmm.
So yeah, man.
Yeah. I think, and also being offended, it just wastes so much time and
Mm,
energy. It doesn't benefit you at all. So I think we have a right to take things a certain way. You know,
mm,
like, it's your right, it's your prerogative. You can absolutely do that. For me, it really comes down to, does this serve you? Does it
mm,
serve you to be offended? Does it help you? Like, mostly no. So why are we doing it?
mm,
You
mm.
know, it just gets in the way of us really getting to the core of what it is that we need to hear. Like, we can't let the packaging get in the way of what we really need. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that, look, if someone is constantly like trying to be rude to you, it doesn't mean I want to spend loads of time with you.
Oh
But
yeah.
I can still make that decision and without being offended. You
Mm,
know, and that's what I think we struggle with sometimes, is learning how to distance ourselves from some of that stuff without being offended. Like,
mm,
that's a really tough balance. But like, when it happens, because it's still going to happen even if you distance yourself, but what do I take from that engagement? What do I take from that interaction? How do I get better based on that? That's really important.
You know, it's funny, yeah. Before we even got into the studio, I was starting to look at Proverbs as a potential
Mm.
talking point for this episode. And so I was at Proverbs chapter 1, and there's some verses that I think are very relevant here. Um, but it's Proverbs 1 from verse 20 to, let's just say, 22. And I'm going to
Mm.
put it up on screen. For those that are listening audibly, you are missing out on the visual experience where you get to see it all. That happens on YouTube at Reason to Behold. Feel free to check out the visuals and a bit more of an interactive experience. And for those that are there as well, congratulations, you get the early releases a lot of the time. Um, so it's Proverbs chapter 1 from verse 21, 20 to 22. And it says, Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates, she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? And it goes on. But why I thought it was an interesting set of verses to bring up here is because wisdom isn't just crying out from the voices that we're comfortable with or the voices that
Mm.
we enjoy hearing things from the most. Oftentimes, wisdom cries out in the places that we take for granted, right? Places that are just a part of the everyday, places that are the marketplace, right? Who's going out to the market in search for wisdom? It's just part of you just going through life, right?
Mm.
Who's going through the noisy streets saying, okay, where is wisdom? Wisdom, where are you? We're not. Entrance of the city gates, when that was obviously appropriate for their context in that time. No one's looking for it. Do you get what I'm saying? But I think it's interesting how much at the forefront of even just the everyday moments of our lives, we are constantly exposed to opportunities to benefit from wisdom.
If you choose to be.
Yeah.
If you choose to pay attention, if you choose to engage with it, it's a choice. It's not automatic.
Yeah, man.
Has there been a time that you can remember where you were offended by something that could help you?
Plenty of times. Plenty of times. I think probably a relevant example, which I often come back to, is health and fitness again, right? I think I can think of a number of times where I had conversations where the emphasis on weight loss and being in better shape and overall better health was drawn back to the subject of nutrition, diet, and that side of things, right? And it's something that I've always generally accepted as a principle. But I think to the degree that I respect and accept it now is something that I think only really kicked in more so this year with the more knowledge that I've gained. Because again, I can think of a number of times where I think the headline of that conversation would have been something that would have jarred me, because I would think to myself, but I have been tracking the food that I've been eating, but I have been in a calorie deficit from what I can see, right? And I can't explain why what I'm being told as, have you looked at diet, have you looked at nutrition, doesn't seem to be adding up with me who's saying, yeah, I darn well have looked at diet and nutrition and I'm working like a dog in the gym, but it just doesn't seem to be shifting. And I think in those times where I kind of heard things like that, I didn't all the way write them off, but I just had a big question mark, because it just didn't seem as straightforward and as simple as it was being presented. And to be honest, now with what I've learned, especially this year onwards, I've understood a lot more about the why behind it and how the principle is generally true. It's just a lot more nuanced than it's often presented. And so I think even something like that, those types of conversations, which I may have historically heard and maybe resisted at the time, having gained a lot more knowledge and experience now, I could look back on those types of conversations and say, you know what, maybe it wasn't just a case of they've oversimplified it based on what they think in theory, but maybe there was just a lot more detail that could have gone into understanding why the principle was true, but it was a lot more nuanced than maybe either of us maybe thought at the time.
Because so, I think some of it comes down to humility and being willing to engage with the fact that, you know, even though I've been doing what I think is the right thing, if it's not working, there must be something different. You know, there must be something that's missing, and it's kind of seeking that thing. And I think for those who can't see, what does your t-shirt say? What does it say?
Don't work unless you do.
And sometimes part of the work is realizing that, look, I don't have the outcomes that I want, so something must not be right in terms of what I'm doing, because it's very rare that you do all the right things and you don't get the right outcome. Very, very, very rare. Very, very rare. So sometimes it's just about understanding what's the missing piece. And sometimes it's in that you hear from people, you have the conversations you don't want to have, but that's where you find out what the missing piece is. So for me, like, that humility element of it is so important, to be willing to hear things you don't want to hear necessarily.
Yeah.
and to explore them and to understand and to get the more knowledge, get the more wisdom to then start doing the things that you need to.
I hear that, man. Final words for the person that has been easily offended and has written off everybody else as a hater unless they sang the song that they wanted them to sing.
You have every right to be offended, but it doesn't serve you. When I was young, this is where I learned one of these lessons. I'm tall. I play basketball. Yeah. I had a coach who said to me, you shouldn't shoot the basketball, because he felt I couldn't shoot. And to be honest, I probably couldn't. Yeah. And let's be very real about it.
Yeah.
What I did in the summer is I took his words and said, okay, he's telling me I shouldn't shoot. And he wasn't nice about it either. It was in front of people. It was ugly. And in the summer, I went away and I learned how to shoot. I watched YouTube videos. I spent my whole summer practicing, learning how to shoot. When I got to other places, they rated my shooting ability. Yeah. If I just listened to him and just been like, oh, well, he said I shouldn't shoot. How dare he, blah, 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 blah. Bro, to this day, I wouldn't be able to shoot the basketball. But now I can shoot the basketball because I took it. And I said, oh, okay, I'm deficient in this thing. Let me go and learn it. Let me go and grow. And it has served me for almost 20 years since that point. So you have every right to be offended. What they said probably was a horrible thing, but does it serve you? Because if you hold on to that offense, the only person that's going to struggle is you. They're not even going to remember it. They're not going to care. You're the one that's going to suffer. So you can hold on to it. You have every right to be offended, but it doesn't serve you.
That's real, man.
What's your final words?
The adjustments that you need to get you to where you're trying to go are probably hidden within the things that you're most offended by.
Oh, good. So good.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening. Go and find what's under that offense. Go and find it, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Peace.